Welcome back. As you know, we were talking about the limitations on criminal law, and this is where we finished up was the 14th Amendment. I read through that, and the idea of equal protection, in essence, what that what the wording was, and it still is in the 14th Amendment, and in essence, what was the intent of it, and also kind of how that has actually worked out. How through practice, through laws, through just the different policies that have been made, how has that truly worked out, and how should it work? So, as since I went through this last time, um, I want to go through the idea of not only what was and is the 14th Amendment and how it applies, but also how can we justify? Because there are times that different laws are created to set different groups apart. Okay, how does that work? How can are there times that's even constitutional? And the answer to that is yes. There are times that we can make laws specifically intended to help particular groups or individuals, more so groups. And I say that by individuals, I mean those groups themselves that were set apart. So we're going to get into what we call strict, intermediate, and rational scrutiny. Okay, so those are the levels of scrutiny. I want to go ahead and start off with the highest level. It's called strict scrutiny, and so basically, as you can read here, classifies people based on race, alienage, religion, or national origin. Meaning, such laws are written specifically for people of or guiding, in essence, people and protecting people potentially. Sometimes it works the other way, of specific groups. Normally based on Constitution, based on the 14th Amendment, there are certain rights that are given to all people, including different nationalities, races, religions, sexes, and so on. But when are there times that it's okay to have laws that, in essence, go what some might deem as against that? And strict scrutiny, since it is against specific classes or races, I should say, religions, etc., it has the most, 5 different levels of 5 different questions that have to be answered. I'm not going to go all over all 5 of those because they're actually in a video I'll provide for you if you go to the PowerPoint for this particular section. But long story short, as you can read, it's unconstitutional unless there is a compelling argument for it. Okay, there has to be a compelling reason why you would separate or make a law that is designated for a particular group. All right, so like I said, it's a compelling argument, and it cannot be. And here's the other thing: it cannot be used or utilized if there is a less restrictive way of still accomplishing the same goal or purpose. Okay, so unfortunately, if I scroll down here, you'll see a couple different cases that were used throughout history. The first one was one that was later deemed unconstitutional. Loving versus Virginia has to do with interracial marriages in the state of Virginia. But one that was actually held up, surprisingly. I mean, at the time, I'm not saying I agree with it, but I understand where people were thinking, was Korematsu versus the U.S. So the problem we had with this has to go back to World War II, whenever there were internment camps for Japanese citizens who had moved to the U.S. and were living in the United States, especially towards the beginning of World War II. So even though there was a high level of skepticism or wondering, okay, well, if we're at war with Japan, how many of these individuals are potentially giving information to the Japanese government, or potentially could be a threat from within? All right. So, like I said, I'm not saying I agreed with what they chose to do, but that was the thinking at the time. Hence why the government agreed to go ahead and let internment camps exist. So, for a short period of time, but they did exist because there was that fear. And you'll find out as we go through this semester, we'll talk about some things that if the government can show that it's in the interest of the people, meaning of the state, of the federal government, whatever, if it's the interest of the overall people, citizens, then certain laws can be, basically some rights can be taken away if it's in the best interest of the overall people. We deal with that mostly in law enforcement. That's more so in the case of how and when we can pull people over due to, for example, checkpoints for different reasons. All right, it has to do with can you stop someone at a checkpoint even though you don't have another legal reason to stop them, such as know that you're aware of. Most traffic stops deal with like some type of moving violation, some type of equipment violation, something like that. But with checkpoints, you don't necessarily have that, but there are different levels to what you can and can't do, limitations. It's not what I consider a strict scrutiny type of issue because it has nothing to do with equal protection. All right, but it is an instance there where, in some regards, it's still dealing with this concept of what is better for everyone else, the safety of the many, if you want to call it that. Okay, so. But once again, strict scrutiny deals with any of those groups that I listed before, but it has to be a compelling argument. And I know that wording seems kind of strange, but that is what it has to be, something that is a very compelling case put forth by the legislators of the government to put that law in place. So going on from that, though, let's go to the intermediate scrutiny, which I'm not going to spend as much time on it simply because it is in between the strict scrutiny and rational basis. So, I mean, it's a broader scope of things. It's not going to cause as many problems as strict scrutiny would, and it's also not going to get passed as often as what rational basis type of laws would be. So, what we have with intermediate scrutiny, as you can read here, it says important government interest. All right, so this has basically, like I said, it's very, very, it's broad. So therefore, I'm not going to try to break it down any further than that. But there has to be, it doesn't quite rise to the level of being strict scrutiny because it's not based on things like religion, ethnicity, or race. It's none of those. It's most of the time it's based on someone's sex. Okay, so, and it's not always a negative thing. So, for example, though they've been around for a while, laws for say maternity leave or laws that are aimed towards helping women, for example, those could be considered intermediate scrutiny type of statutes or considerations, because is it picking a particular group? Yes, but there is an important reason why they are picking to say make a law that is applicable to only this group. Like I said, for females for maternity leave, though they do have paternity leave options for men. Women are the only ones biologically who can have children, so therefore there is more of a medical risk and all those other things. That's why some of these laws are directed towards women only, or that's probably the biggest category, like I said, based on sex rather than race or religion or anything like that. So going on from intermediate, though, we have rational basis. And there simply has to be a legitimate reason or cause. So, it does involve classifications. All right. So all of these are still applying it to a particular group or groups. But in the case of rational basis, like I said, it has to be a legitimate purpose behind that law. Okay. Behind that policy that you're considering. So, For example, anything that would be the disadvantage, I'm going to read from here: disadvantaged, mentally handicapped, homosexuality or homosexuals, innocent children of illegal aliens. For example, I'll throw some of these out here. The ADA, American Disabilities Act, that applies to, in essence, the first two. Okay, how can we help people? And that could be age discrimination. It could be physical or mental issues. They have people that say, "Oh, well, I can't hire." It used to be before, "Can't hire you," or "I can't allow you to do this or that because you have a physical handicap that doesn't allow you to work in this field." Well, anymore, there has to be some type of accommodation made for those individuals. So you have that. Another side of it is mentally handicapped. There are laws that protect them from a couple different things. For one, to make sure that they are cared for, there has to be someone who is they could be considered power of attorney, for example, to help make them make decisions as far as their care. Also, for those who have any type of mental health concern, there has to be some type of protection, against their harm. Or, for example, in a lot of states, if it comes back to if someone, you had to have the mens rea, right, the criminal intent to commit a crime. Well, what happens if you have someone who has a mental illness that is being used by someone else to commit crimes? Okay, those are all. That's instead of charging the person who is mentally ill, typically in that situation, if they were coerced into that action, what would happen is they are no longer considered criminally liable, but the person who was responsible for causing them to do something like that or coercing them to commit that crime then becomes responsible. So, okay, homosexuality has been, once again, you cannot discriminate as far as hiring is concerned. Also, though they existed with civil unions, from what I've read, basically they were essentially the same as what they tried to do. But some states have also created marriage license for homosexual couples. Okay, innocent children of illegal aliens. For example, people want to throw a fit about what's happening at the border with illegal immigrants. First of all, besides the fact that they are illegal, they're actually not treated any different than a criminal who is a U.S. citizen, because if you're a criminal in the United States, if you've been charged with a crime and you are going to be in jail, you are hence separated from your children, from your family. That's normal. That's how normal procedure, basically. And the other reason why they're separated from them is to make sure that that's actually their family and not, which has been happening more and more, where people are either taking children and using them to get across saying they're family and they're really not. And then once they get over here, they either get rid of the kids or put them into, say, human trafficking via sex trade, or could be forced labor. But those are instances there. But in essence, those children of the illegal immigrants, for a while we also had DACA, but also the children themselves are protected from certain criminal offenses. Okay, so those are examples there where it's a legitimate purpose. All right, so this video I mentioned earlier that helps explain some of these in a little bit different detail, that link is available through here. Like I said, I'm not going to go to that right now. I'm going to worry about it. But what I want to get to in our next video is going to be other limitations on the criminal law. I know this video might be a little short, but I want to make sure I get the full breadth of the information, and it can kind of help explain things a little bit better. So I'm going to come back with another video covering the limitations such as ex post facto, and we'll kind of cover those and see what other options we have or other considerations we have.